Hi guys, how's it going? This is Patrick from Nintendo Talk, and today we have a very special video, and it is actually our first ever Patreon discussion video. And this video is actually presented by JD of this channel, and he wants to know about a very interesting topic. But before I go into the question itself, if you guys want to join the Patreon, the link will be in the description. There are 3 reward tiers, and this reward tier happens to be a discussion video by yours truly. So let's get ready and let's go right into the topic. Today's topic is going to be all about Metroid Prime 4. What to expect, new mechanics, where does the story leave off, and I guess I'll start with that because that's kind of the biggest question mark for me. For those of you who have not played the Metroid Prime series, I feel like the story wrapped up pretty nice. It was kind of clean cut, and you felt good after you played those games. And essentially, the Prime series, Samus is dealing with being corrupted by Phazon. And this material was kind of mined and created by the space pirates, which then they infuse this Phazon into the Metroids, which then affect Samus herself. And that's kind of the whole kind of storyline with the Prime series. It's Samus dealing with this, corruption of this Phazon material, hence the name of one of the games being Corruption. But Metroid Prime wasn't just a glittery and fancy name. Metroid Prime was essentially a character in the series. Metroid Prime and Dark Samus kind of being, one in their own. But essentially after Metroid Prime 3, spoiler alert, guys, if you don't want to hear this, mute right now. But she defeats Dark Samus and cures herself of Phazon. And it wraps up pretty nice, like I said before. So when Nintendo revealed that Prime 4 would be out, it didn't really make too much sense to me. I mean, at the end, kind of Silic's ship takes off, kind of a cliffhanger there. So I could see him possibly being, the main element of Metroid Prime 4's story. But it's very interesting because it's going to be interesting where they go with that story. Is Dark Samus going to come back? It felt like it ended off pretty well. So that's kind of my first thing is, as far as story goes, I'm not too sure. I think it's going to involve Silex. It pretty much has to at that point. But Metroid Prime 4 is interesting because, we can basically assume at this point that it's going to be the first person that Metroid Prime has been throughout the series. I can't really see Metroid Prime 4 being this 2D side-scrolling game all of a sudden. I definitely think it's going to be first person. He specifically asked me about that. So I think mechanically and gameplay-wise, it's going to play about the same. We're going to get, the first-person view of Samus. He also asked, will there be kind of aspects of the game changing in terms of handheld mode, and then you could play a different way if you docked it. I don't think we're there yet with Switch games. I think, down the line, we might get this weird kind of Nintendo WarioWare type game that kind of implements the fact that you can only do something in handheld mode, and then you dock it, and then it's a completely different experience. I don't think that they're going to do that with Metroid Prime 4. It seems kind of gimmicky and kind of experimental, and this game means way too much to Nintendo at this point to kind of play around with mechanics like that. I could see kind of a quote-unquote Switch element where, you'll be playing in first person and then all of a sudden it'll switch to 2D, kind of similar to Odyssey when you go into the pipe and you're kind of 2D Mario. I could see some 2D segments of this game. And I think that's pretty safe to assume. Going back to the roots, of course, people love the 2D games, Super Metroid being one of my favorite Metroid games in the series. So mechanically wise, Samus could quote-unquote switch to a 2D perspective, and that might be kind of a subtle gimmick without taking too much away from the game and from the series itself. One of the biggest question marks, though, is the environment of this game. We are, in modern times now, and open world games and large games are kind of almost the norm now when you're talking about big adventure games. So will Metroid Prime 4 be an open adventure? Certainly something that the Prime series hasn't been too familiar with. I mean, you feel like you're in an open environment, but it's very much, there's paths, classic Metroid, where you have to go to point A, point B, and you're kind of given a map. Could they change this with kind of an open world game? That would be very interesting, and something that I wouldn't oppose, but I don't want them to make the game too giant where it's just kind of like a No Man's Sky situation, and the environment takes over from the storyline and stuff like that. So I would like to see them stick on one planet. I don't want to see multiple planets. I think Metroid's at its best when the atmosphere and kind of everything around Samus is closely looked at. And it's just so detailed. You really do feel alone in this series. So I really want them to kind of stick to one planet, one environment. I'm not totally opposed against open world, but we will see when the game comes out. One of the bigger elements that will be interesting, because Nintendo has really focused on multiplayer with the Switch. And I mean, the console comes with 2 controllers. Will this game emphasize on the multiplayer aspect? We don't know, obviously, but this game is set up to be a very good experience in terms of multiplayer. Could this game become the next Halo Online? Who knows? But it is set up pretty perfectly to have some kind of multiplayer experience. Now, the fault with this is if they spend too much time on multiplayer, will it take away from the story, which I don't want to happen. Metroid shines obviously in campaigns and storylines and stuff like that. So I don't want them to focus too much on multiplayer, but it would be a nice addition to kind of get some casual players in and play some Metroid. I don't know though. What do you guys think in the comments section below? Multiplayer is kind of a weird topic to talk about. There's definitely pros and cons to it, but I definitely don't want it to take away from the story overall. So when is this game going to release? That's another point that JD asked me to talk about. And so I actually went to you guys. I put a poll up on Twitter basically saying, when will Metroid Prime 4 release? Which year? I gave you guys 3 options: 2018, next year, 2019, and 2020 and beyond. And it looks like 2019 was the winner, with 46% of you saying 2019, 29% of you, which I think is still a high number for next year, and 2020 and beyond, 25% of you, which is another large number. So let's talk about the majority. 2019 being a possible release date for this game. Of course, we've only seen a teaser trailer at E3, which I think was exciting for me, but after the fact, I was like, you know what? We pretty much just saw a logo that looked like it was built in about 30 minutes. I am excited about the series. I'm excited that Nintendo announced something and they kind of promised us this game, but that's essentially all we got. And it kind of scares me that we didn't get any kind of gameplay or, maybe a cinematic trailer or something. That kind of worries me. So pretty much for those reasons, I'm going to go with the majority here, and I'm going to say 2019 is probably the sweet spot for this game. Now, where 2019 we could see this game, I think maybe where kind of we saw Breath of the Wild, that kind of March threshold, and if not March, then I think we're looking at a fall release. I think this is a major game, and Nintendo has been kind of famous for putting their major titles at the beginning and at the end of the year. So if we don't see it 2019 spring, we will see it 2019 fall. The chances of this, guys, coming out next year, I think is getting slimmer and slimmer. I would give it maybe a 10% chance of coming out next year. And if it does come out next year, probably like a November or December release. I mean, who knows? This game could completely take over next year's E3. We've seen Nintendo kind of focus on E3s with one singular title. If you guys remember Breath of the Wild, and then we had this past year was pretty much Odyssey. Next year, could it be Metroid Prime 4? We don't really know, but if I had to give you guys a solid answer, I think 2019 is probably the sweet spot for this game. The other 25% of you that said 2020 and beyond, I would not doubt this either. Metroid games are pretty famous for kind of taking the Zelda approach and taking quite a long time to make these games. So I would not be surprised if it went beyond 2020. but that's highly unlikely. I think it's 2019, 2020 at the latest. Prime 4, let me just talk about this to kind of wrap it all up. Metroid Prime 4, I think, is one of the most important releases for Nintendo. And, Odyssey, of course, this year is a big release. Breath of the Wild kind of got everyone to get a Switch and kind of show, okay, this hardware can handle this type of game. Of course, it was released on the Wii U as well, but Breath of the Wild really was a console-selling game. But Prime 4 is going to be a little bit different. This is going to show not only the power of the Switch, because Prime games have been known to kind of push the hardware. The first game being released on the GameCube really pushed the GameCube's hardware, and that game still looks great today. And then the other two were on the Wii, which kind of pushed that hardware as well. And then we got Other M, which that's what you're seeing in the background now, which I think that game still looks pretty impressive today. So I'm expecting nothing but the best for Metroid Prime 4. I really think that this game is going to look fantastic and maybe could entice third-party games to maybe be like, oh, okay, these graphics can work on the Switch. Let us put our games on the Switch. So I think that this is a very important game for Nintendo. I'm really looking forward to this, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. I want to thank JD again for bringing this topic up to me. What do you guys think? What's going on with Prime 4, guys? Thank you very much. This is Patrick from Nintendo Talk. Out.